Hello and welcome to Let's Compare Commodore 64 versus Amiga Stunt Car Racer. The Amiga version, I assume, is quite well known, at least, and I was quite surprised to find that there's a Commodore 64 version of this game, years ago, that is. And much to my surprise, I expected that game to be absolutely utter rubbish. It's actually not bad at all. I will cover version differences before going into details about the game itself. This game relies very heavily on computing power, and yeah, the result should speak for itself. But instead of making some half-hearted attempt of just remotely trying to make a similar version on the Commodore 64, the tracks are identical. There's no corners been cut. The length and shape and design of the different tracks are exactly the same. The Commodore 64 version, surprise surprise, runs a bit slower and cannot display as much of the track as the Amiga version can, but outside of that, the two games are virtually identical. So, using my new approach to how to Let's Compare videos, I will be using this editing style going forward, I think, where I will give one version a full screen and the other version the bottom right corner, so that both versions get a chance to shine or be laughed at, whatever is the case, instead of having two half-screen versions running at the same time. But on to the game itself. Formula 1 is boring. It's just racing at 200 miles an hour on flat tracks. Who cares about that? It's for wuzzers, amateurs. So let's build some tracks which are elevated and have some crazy jumps and other obstacles, and then let's race on them. We only have one opponent per track, but since the tracks are the main opponents, we don't need any more opponents. It could be an interesting experience having this kind of race with 20 cars on the tracks, I think. And not a very pleasant experience, but an interesting one. And the tracks have a different requirements in order to navigate them, which we'll get into a bit later. But for now, since the Amiga version is done, we'll switch to full screen on the Commodore 64 version. And then we can quickly talk interface. Bottom left corner, L3, lap 3, should make sense. B, it's your boost. The flame is coming out of the top of the engine pipes. That enhances your acceleration. Surprise, surprise. Underneath that you have a number. If there's a minus in front of it, that means you are ahead of your opponent, and if there's not a minus in front of it, that means that he's ahead of you. Or you're behind, whatever you prefer. It is mainly an indication of how hard you need to push in order to make sure that you actually win the races. If you are miles behind, then you will probably have to try and push a bit harder in order to catch up, but if you're miles ahead, then you can afford to take it a bit easy and try to avoid smashing up your car. Which will be the next thing we go over once we get into the second track. And then we'll go into details about how the game itself plays out. This time, the Commodore 64 version will get the full screen, and the Amiga will be relegated to the bottom right corner. If you look at the frame of the racing window, the top frame is actually your damage meter. There's nothing to see right now, but a crack will slowly form going from top left to top right. If it ever reaches the top right hand side, your car is wrecked, and you can't race in a wrecked car. Surprise, surprise. Avoiding damage is virtually impossible. because the car will take some strain from being pushed hard into corners and jumps and landings and all sorts of things. And while it is tempting to just go full belt over certain obstacles or jumps, you have to navigate them relatively cautiously, because if you have a harsh landing, you will get structural damage, which will show on the framework as a big fat hole. And of course, the crack that will slowly form in your framework will have no issues in navigating a big fat hole. So a few of those kind of holes, and you are going to be praying every single time you raise a track. Because even if you land gently, and even if you navigate the tracks virtually perfectly, the damage you will incur will still add up over time. I will basically say if you get 2 or 3 of those holes, you may as well just restart the game, because the structural damage is not repaired between races or even divisions. It will stay with you until you beat Division 1 and get promoted to the Super League, which is the game basically restarting but with faster cars and faster acceleration. The way the gameplay plays out is that you start in Division 4 and you race 2 opponents on 2 tracks, and this is going to be a very, very bad landing. Ouchie, 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 ouch. Structural damage. Anyway, you race 2 opponents on the 2 tracks connected to a division, and the most points you can get per track is 3 points. 2 points for winning and 1 point for having the fastest lap. If you have the most points at the end of a division season, you're promoted to the next higher division, and if you are in a higher division and finish last at the end of the division season, you will get relegated. So it works like most other division systems work. Not too complicated. And too fast with an unlucky bounce and sent off the track. We are being craned back to the track, but of course while we are being craned back, our opponent is undertaking us because we are at the moment hanging in the air. And now we have the damage of the car to be worried about and trying to catch up to the opponent, and we've got a 4 laps to go, and there's no chance that this car will ever scrape through. So, as I was saying before, gameplay-wise, the 2 versions are identical. I'm actually surprised that they didn't cut any corners for the Commodore 64 version. There might be a visual difference, and the Amiga version will play smoother and faster and all that stuff, but the foundation is exactly the same. Any experience you have with the Amiga version can easily be applied to the Commodore 64 version. All rules that apply in the Amiga version also applies on that. So, we are at the end of the main video, but I'm going to add a bit of bonus footage, so to speak, because the different tracks available in the different divisions have some challenges that needs to be navigated, and I will quickly run over the different tracks, because there might be some tracks which some people are struggling with, and I'll be running through them in practice mode on the Amiga version. So let us go into our Division 3 tracks. We'll start with the Stepping Stones. A relatively easy track except for the stepping stones themselves, because they are deceptively frustrating to navigate the first few times. The key to these races is knowing ahead of time how fast you can safely go and how fast you need to go. So, the first bit here, when you come around from first lap, you will have plenty of speed to just jump these holes. It doesn't really matter. They are non-issue, basically. First jump here, you need about 170 miles an hour in order to clear it. And the follow-up jump is probably between 140 and 170. But now we get around to the stepping stones themselves, and you do not want to go faster than 140. Land between the stepping stones and boost to get enough power to take the next jump. If you go faster, you will probably land the first jump, but then you will miss the second stepping stone and slam into the third, causing massive damage to your car. 140 boost in between landings. That is the key to that section, which is the only challenging section. So let's move on to the big ramp. We had the little ramp in Division 4. Here's the big one. The thing is, going too fast is just as bad as going too slow, because if you're going too slow, you're not going to clear the jumps, but if you go too fast, you might overshoot and land quite harshly. And this beginning bit here, it may not seem like much of an issue, but when you come around after lap 1 and going down full belt, that can easily send you flying off the track. Again, the key here is 170. You don't want to go much faster. You definitely don't want to go slower, because your wheels will catch the ramp, which is not good. You will do an uncontrollable flip. And a big boy coming up, and you need just over 200 in order to clear it. You don't want to go much faster than that, because you'll land on a flat track, but you definitely don't want to go slower, because you're going to smack straight into the ramp. So, relatively short lap. So, Division 2 coming up, the high jump. That big flat thing, or the big spiky thing in the middle of that jump, is your main obstacle, but there's a deceptive part of track on this track, which needs to be handled correctly. I failed to do it in this video part, by the way, just saying ahead of time. From the start, you need to build up a solid amount of speed, because you need about 220 in order to scale that bit. And of course, again, a short landing area, so going super fast is just as bad as not going fast enough. This bit here, if you get to about 190, you will land softly at the top of the second hill bit instead of bouncing, making it much more safe. And here comes the deceptive piece of track. Look at the angle of it. It is very easy to get sent off, like I just did. And if you're going very fast into that bend, you will most likely cause structural damage to your car. So, the roller coaster, one of two very deceptive tracks in the game. Each side is shorter than it appears, but if you look at your boost levels for this track, the game is trying to get you to do silly things. It's giving you an awful lot of boost, far more than you will ever need for 3 laps. We are going uphill, and it is again tempting to go full bonkers, but you don't have much landing space. You definitely want to clear this top section at a slow speed. And again here, you don't want to go over that much faster than 110, or you will land quite harshly. How the game did not evolve me with structural damage for that one, I don't know, but it didn't. So this game, or this track, is full of short sections with scaling sections where you are tempted to go very fast, but if you go very fast, you are going to fly off the track. The key is to maintain as high a speed as you can where it's safe to do, but be prepared to slow down, because there's quite a few blind sections where you can't see where you're going as soon as you go airborne, which is rather bad. And you have some serious drops, and of course the best way to maintain your speed is by keeping the wheels on the track instead of in the air, where they're just spinning freely. And overwent because of an unlucky bounce, and because I didn't control harshly enough, or hard enough, compensated enough, whatever. And that's the end of this track, or lap at least. So, Division 1, the ski jump. another very deceptive track, because you have to treat it like a real ski jump, which means that if you don't get enough of run-up, you are going to fail your landing spectacularly, which I'm not showing off, thankfully. But it is another deceptive track with a lot of blind sections after hills, or high spots, whatever you call them. Don't get as much boost as you did on roller coaster, so you're not necessarily encouraged to go full ham. But as you can see here, very short, nearly went off the track there, but here, after this hilly bit, and after this turn, the ski jump itself comes up, and you want to crawl over that edge. I might be going too fast. You want to crawl and now accelerate like crazy. You want to reach over 200 miles an hour in order to land softly, because what happens is if you go over the first section at too high a speed, you will go airborne and not have enough time to build up speed for the jump itself, causing bad things to happen. And finally, the Drawbridge, the worst track in the entire game. Extremely frustrating and very, very obnoxious, and it's hard to make a call for what to try to do, because the drawbridge is a drawbridge. It's moving. When it's at its lowest point, you don't need much more than 70 miles an hour in order to jump the gap. When it's at its highest point, especially if you approach it when it's at its highest point, it's like driving into a wall. And what you often will find is that you are going up the bridge section and it reaches its top when you reach the top of the bridge, and you basically get flipped off the track. Your timing where you are when you reach it is what speed you're going, how it's moving, and things like that are all depending on how well you manage to navigate that. It is the only real challenge on this track, but it is such a massive, brutal challenge, and it is very, very easy to completely and utterly wreck your car on this track. Not much else to say, so just finishing this lap, and then I will say, hope you found this somewhat enjoyable. Thanks for watching, take care, and see you in the next one. Bye bye for now.